Let's travel back in time. The year is 1001. The Song dynasty in China is in a desperate fight for its life against enemies up in the north. And while all eyes are on the war, some officials make a seemingly tiny change to the administration in a faraway region called Sichuan. Nobody really paid it much attention, but that one small decision, it was the key that would finally unlock a bloody decades-long puzzle.
So this is the big mystery we're diving into. Sichuan was known all across China as this land of unbelievable wealth and comfort. The people there were famous for loving peace, for wanting an easy life, and yet, for decades, this very same region was the epicenter of constant, violent rebellion. Rich, peaceful people, they don't usually start revolutions. So what on earth was going on here?
To get to the bottom of this, we have to see Sichuan the way the Song dynasty did, as a place with two completely different faces. One, calm and peaceful, and the other, incredibly violent.
Yet this wasn't just a single rebellion. It was a recurring nightmare for the government. They conquered Sichuan in 965, and a mutiny exploded almost right away. Then a huge uprising in 993, another one in 997, and, you guessed it, another one in the year 1000. It was just this cycle of violence that would not stop. So on the one hand, you have this image of a peaceful, wealthy land. There was an old saying, Yang Wan Yi Tu, which basically meant Sichuan was the second richest place in the whole empire. People here loved comfort, and in the past, they'd always surrendered pretty quickly to invaders. In fact, a famous poem even made fun of them, saying 140,000 men took off their armor and not one of them was a real man. Ouch. But then, on the other hand, these are the same people behind these constant bloody rebellions. So why fight so hard now when they always gave up so easily before? All right, so where do we start looking for answers? Well, the first and most obvious motive for any conflict is usually money, or in this case, the theft of that money. See, after the Song court conquered Sichuan, they didn't just govern it. They started to systematically strip it of its wealth. One record put it very plainly: heavy goods by boat, light goods by cart. Just about everything of value, we're talking copper, cloth, gold, silk, it was all loaded up and shipped out to the capital. This was a massive, organized plunder. And how long did this go on for? More than 10 years. Just try to imagine that. For a full decade, you're just watching as the wealth of your home is packed up and carted away. Of course, this created a really deep sense of anger and loss, and it was definitely a major reason for all the unrest. But here's the thing, anger over money, it doesn't quite explain the sheer level of violence. The real source of the conflict was much deeper. It was a kind of psychological divide, something that was born from a century of history that had literally split China in two. So, before the Song unified China, the country was basically broken. The north was this chaotic, war-torn, and poor land. But the south, where Sichuan is located, it was the total opposite. It was protected by mountains, so it stayed peaceful, stable, and became incredibly wealthy. They were like two different worlds. And this created a deep psychological resistance. People in the wealthy south, well, they felt superior. They looked at the new Song rulers, who came from the poor, chaotic north, as total outsiders. They hated the idea of being ruled by them. It was a massive culture clash. The rich and stable south simply did not want to be controlled by the poor and war-torn north. Okay, so we've got anger over money, and we've got this deep resentment. But even with all that, how does a rebellion actually start? It's not as simple as people just picking up weapons. In Sichuan, the rebellions were sparked by a hidden engine, a very strange power dynamic that was left over from a more chaotic time. This dynamic has a name, Guan Fan Zai Sha, which you can translate as power from below. Normally, power flows from the top down, right? A general gives an order and a soldier follows it. But in the chaotic era right before the Song, that system got flipped on its head. The soldiers on the ground held the real power, and they could literally force their commanders to do whatever they wanted. So how did this power from below actually work? Let's break it down. Step 1. A group of soldiers has a complaint. Maybe they're not getting enough food or their pay is late. Step 2. They go to their commander and pressure him to lead them in a protest. Now this next part, step 3, is absolutely crucial. The commander is trapped. If he says no, his own soldiers might just kill him. But if he says yes, he's instantly a rebel leader. And just like that, a rebellion is born, often completely against the leader's will. And this isn't just some abstract theory. It really happened. Take the rebellion of Wang Jun in the year 1000. It started because a few soldiers were angry that another unit got better food, so they mutinied. They started killing officers who stood in their way. They went to several commanders and said, "Lead us in a rebellion." When those commanders refused, the soldiers killed them. Finally, they got to their own commander, Wang Jun. They put a sword to his neck and gave him a choice: lead us or we will kill you. With dead officers lying on the ground all around him, what could he possibly do? He agreed, and he became the leader of a massive rebellion he never wanted.
This story tells us something so important. Even after 40 years of Song rule, this power from below was like a ghost from a more chaotic time. The violent, unstable way of doing things from the past, it wasn't dead yet. It proved that the nightmare of the old world was still haunting this new dynasty.
So, this brings us to the biggest challenge the Song dynasty faced. It wasn't just about conquering land. It was about totally rebuilding a broken world. It was about creating a new, stable order from the ashes of the old one.
And this raises a really fascinating question. You see, earlier dynasties, like the Han and the Tang, they unified China in about 7 years. But the Song dynasty, they struggled for over 40 years to bring peace to the country and end these rebellions. Why was it so much harder for them?
Well, to understand their struggle, we can look at 2 different ways a society can fall apart. The first is called tubeng, which is like an earth collapse. Think of a sandcastle that just crumbles into dust. When society completely collapses like that, everyone is desperate for a new order. Rebuilding is actually easier because you're starting from scratch. But the Song faced a totally different situation. It's called huajie, or tile disintegration. This is like a beautiful porcelain vase that shatters. It's broken, for sure, but not into dust. It's broken into big, complex, well-formed pieces. And each piece, like the old kingdom in Sichuan, still has its own structure, its own wealth, its own identity. Trying to glue all of those strong, independent pieces back together into one unified vase, now that is an incredibly difficult job. And this brings us right back to where we started. That seemingly small administrative change in the year 1001, that was the Song's final solution to this problem. By dividing the huge, rebellious region of Sichuan into 4 smaller, more manageable parts, they were essentially breaking down that one big, stubborn piece of the shattered vase. It was the final, difficult step they had to take to glue the empire together and finally end a 200-year-long nightmare of separatism.
And the results of all this hard work, they were incredible. This new stability created the foundation for one of the greatest golden ages in all of Chinese history. A new generation of legends was about to rise. Great reformers like Fan Zhongyan, famous judges like Bao Zeng, brilliant writers like Ouyang Shu. The incredible world they would build was only possible because the Song had finally solved the paradox of Sichuan.
So the story of Sichuan shows us that building a nation is about so much more than just winning wars. It's about solving the deep economic, psychological, and structural problems left behind by history. And it leaves us with a question that's still important today. What does it truly take to turn the broken fragments of the past into a unified future?